How's things going at Docomo?
Good. I think, like I said, we're just fortunate because we're kind of prepared for, doing a
Oh,
off-site meeting. Okay.
half a day, everyone. Nestor Licanto here, and welcome to our next guest is Christine Boletto, the chairperson of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. And as we were teasing earlier, this is all about going to be all about the economy. Half a day, Christine.
Half a day, Nestor.
Just first of all, from your perspective as the chairperson of the Chamber of Commerce, tell us what you're hearing from your small business members about the state of the economy and of their businesses.
Well, I tell you, this past week, we put out an actual survey to our members that asked them to relate to us, what has been the effect because of the coronavirus and, how has it impacted their business and basically what have they done to respond to that. And at this point, I mean, and it's still early in the survey, we have 77% of our membership saying that it's had a pretty big impact on their operations. And the two biggest things that they've had to do, aside from reducing store hours, is of course rolling back some employee hours and in some cases the layoff of employees.
Yeah, we're still very early in this whole coronavirus effect, if you will. What is the what do you think is going to happen further down the line? I mean, if it's this early that they're having to make these adjustments already, what about say if this persists for another few weeks at least?
Well, I mean, of course, that's the fear. I think businesses are doing the best that they can to hold on, but we've got a lot of small businesses, especially being very concerned about whether they're going to be able to pay rent, utilities, loans. A lot of businesses take out loans to be able to start up. So there's a lot of concern from our business owners about just being able to make it and be able to pay the bills. Certainly, we don't anticipate things are going to improve. The government has issued a shutdown until March 31st. Naturally, that's, of course, impacting, restaurants and so forth. I've seen some positive things happen and restaurants putting out notices that says, we're doing takeout. Call us. We'll bring it to the curb if we need to. And so businesses are looking for ways to stay open and still generate some income, but still protecting, the community and following through with sort of what the order is out there to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, in earlier conversations that we've had, I think one of the biggest things that the chamber was asking for is a rollback of the business privilege tax from 5% to 4%. I know you've approached that subject before. The governor has kind of rejected that. Well, not kind of rejected; she's rejected it. You have proposed subsequently that maybe how about a half a point? We haven't really heard from her on that. Do you have any updates?
I don't have any updates at this time. We were supposed to have a meeting with her tomorrow afternoon, but I guess, in light of how events have unfolded in the last couple of days, we've been told that that meeting is canceled. So, we certainly want to continue that discussion with her and the senators in the legislature. What we're seeing from our poll is that is the number one thing our members are asking and are saying that it would provide some form of relief. The other thing that we've kind of thrown out there and we're hoping that would be under consideration is, there's been a lot of talk about war claims money coming in to kind of reimburse the government for what they've already paid out. And so one of the things that we want to really push for is to see if the government can prioritize paying out all tax refunds. We think that that will help to stimulate the economy, will help people continue to pay their bills, even for small businesses that might be owed a tax refund. That will certainly help them to keep afloat until we get over this crisis.
I know I've seen several companies, they're giving their customers payment holidays, if you will, like
Yes.
allowing them to defer payments, I think, in fact, one of the telecom companies has come up with that. Is that something that businesses are doing just to uh, help keep the economy afloat, or
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think everyone's considering it. I've talked to some bankers that are also kind of expecting some delinquency or some late payments. You always hope for the best, but I'm really pleased to see and hear from a lot of our members that they were considering just that. I mean, we're a community that is tight knit. We support each other, and I think in these times, it's just natural, especially for local businesses, to want to extend some kind of consideration to their customers to help during these times.
Yeah, I think one of the responses that the governor also gave in response to the business community is that companies should start applying their business continuity plans. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think everyone's been implementing those plans, just even in face of like just the announcements that the tourism numbers were already going down and occupancy rates were going down. But I don't think that anyone's really had a contingency plan that kind of covers the magnitude of what we've seen over the last few days. And so I think everyone's adjusting as time goes by and doing the best that they can. But certainly we're looking forward and we welcome the news at the local and federal level on any kind of relief, especially for employees and small businesses that, don't have the ability to, tap into some fund reserves, any kind of grants, any kind of, you know, loans. I mean, loans are something that we kind of avoid in these kinds of situations, because if you don't have income and you're not sure that income is going to rebound, you certainly don't want to strap yourself. But I think some folks are just desperate. They need help.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other things that the governor had mentioned was that the Guam Economic Development Authority would be out there providing for, and I think also the Small Business Administration
Correct.
providing low interest loans for the business community, even extending those out to 30-year terms.
Right.
But as you mentioned, I mean, for some businesses, that's not something that they really are looking at, because that is just an additional operating expense for them, I imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, keep in mind, just no different than when you go get a loan for a home or a car. There's collateral and there's guarantees that need to be made with reference to income to repay it back. And in these times of uncertainty, it's really difficult. So we hope that also as part of the package that the federal government's going to provide, that Guam may avail itself to, is some kind of grants, some relief, and that's why we keep revisiting the GRT, although we understand the challenges that the government is having, is that is the single best way to help businesses in these trying times. We had asked for a minimum wage delay, but it's already in effect. And so, the next best thing is to revisit the GRT, and then, having a 0.5 reduction is kind of meeting us halfway, and also in consideration of what the governor and the senators are concerned about, which is government collections. So we're hoping that would be taken into some serious consideration.
Yeah, Vice Speaker, on another subject, but Vice Speaker Chelina Nelson is proposing unemployment insurance. I don't have the specifics of it just yet, but what is your reaction to that idea in general?
Well, again, going back to any form of assistance that we can provide to employees is better than nothing. My only concern with unemployment type benefits, I read, the proposed law. It requires that, the person actively continue to find employment. However, if we don't have a way to keep businesses open and keep those jobs open, even to a little degree until we get back or we're on our way to recovery, how are they going to apply for jobs? I mean, you can't go to the hotels and seek employment, because right now, they're the first and hardest hit. The restaurants are being hit. So I think it'll be very difficult. I also think that given what we're facing over the next few weeks, 5 million might not be enough. And if you don't have revenue coming in from these businesses, from GRT or payroll taxes, how do you continue to fund this unemployment, benefit? So, like I said, it's any relief to our employees, any assistance is also always welcome, but we've got to look long term, and we've got to be able to make sure that there's jobs to return to.
Yeah, one of the things about our economy is it's a two-pillar economy, of course, as you well know, the military spending and then also the tourism spending. It appears that if this global coronavirus crisis continues, that we're not going to be able to rely very much on tourism income. So how can we look towards the military, do you think? Do you have any ideas on how we can tap into the military buildup? Because they've got billions of dollars standing by already allocated for the Marine relocation. Do you have any ideas on how maybe we can fast track that spending to kind of augment, for now, what we're losing from the tourism side?
Well, I think actually, from my perspective, that's something that we need to be concerned about as well. I mean, like you said, this is a global issue, and already the President of the United States has put tremendous amounts of restrictions on travel, has issued, basically orders calling for limiting social gathering, limiting movement. I think that's something that we can expect is going to apply to our military bases. I mean, they're equally concerned about keeping our military members safe, as well as their families. There's already been some restrictions on base as far as like purchasing, I think it's just a matter of time if things continue to get worse that we're going to see maybe perhaps some restrictions on their movement and their ability to come into the community and spend their money. So, I'm not so sure that at this point that could be our saving grace.
Yeah. Is there any information that I know the Armed Forces Committee of the Chamber always makes a trip to Washington every year for some high-level discussions with the DoD brass. Is there anything that they brought back that can be of any help?
Well, when they were out there, all of the funding packages were just being contemplated because of this virus. So we're seeing more information come about actually from after their return than what they were able to garner while they were out there. So unfortunately, they weren't there as these things actually were materialized, but. That was part of the discussion. I think their biggest thing was to make sure that the territories were not forgotten in any funding or any considerations of assistance for the states.
Yeah, I think one of the we did an interview yesterday with Dr. Tom Shea, and he was very adamant about an idea to close off the borders for 2 weeks. Don't let anybody in, don't let anybody out, and address the coronavirus situation here, identify potential patients, and he believes that after that 2 weeks period, we can kind of completely address this issue. What do you think of that idea of closing off the borders for a couple of weeks?
Well, I mean, I've not been a part of sort of, and I'm not going to pretend to understand sort of the health implications and how to control. I'll leave that to the medical experts. I think shutting down is an extreme measure to control, but at any time until we address this globally, even after those 2 weeks, if the problem outside of us is not solved, then it's not just 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks, it's 4 weeks. And, of course, the concern is just completely shutting us off. There was some feedback that came to me yesterday that was like, well, what about those that need medical services off island, either in the mainland or in the Philippines that need to travel for emergency medical care? Sometimes we have our outer island brothers and sisters coming to Guam for care. So, how do we handle those? I think, there's a lot more that needs to be discussed, and we kind of need to iron out all those details. But, I'll leave it to those professionals to figure that out.
Chris, we got a couple of questions that came in on Facebook from some listeners and viewers, if you don't mind. How about the small business owners who have no employees? This is from Eddie Cruz.
Well, I think even, and that was one of the things that we've always put out, is that in some cases, very small businesses don't even have employees, but, they still, in order to start a business, had to put out some capital. They've had to do some kind of investment. So they're still in need of some kind of consideration. We definitely supported the exemption that raised the ceiling to $100,000 of a small business's income. And we've also put forth some suggestions to raise that even further to 250,000. So that was one of the ideas that we put out there to try to help the very small businesses, because, really, for anyone who's ever owned a business, just being able to afford your cost of goods and pay some of your operational expenses, your person who invested that business owner is, the employee, the marketing, the cleanup crew. I mean, they serve as everything. And a lot of the times they're not even taking a paycheck. So I definitely think we do need to give consideration to them as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the Dave Santos Act. That's what we were talking about. Have you gotten any feedback from the politicians on raising that?
We've, again, not had very positive feedback coming from them, but I mean, we're just going to continue to try to come to the table. One of the things that we've asked for is, to be able to have an open discussion so that we can collectively come up with solutions, because, we hear the government's plan. The business communities put out some suggestions, but I think it would be helpful for both of us, or all, both sides, to get together and collectively come up with solutions that work for both sides.
Yeah. So what would you recommend then to the folks out there? I know there's been a lot of talk about businesses in Tumon, for example, reducing prices so that folks can do a local staycation, or cutting down the prices at some of the restaurants. Although I don't know how viable that is now, given the limitations on how many people can congregate in a public place. But are there those things that small businesses can do to attract local business? Of course, we don't have the scale to replace 1.5 million tourists that come to Guam every year.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Would that be helpful to small businesses?
Well, I think everybody, and again, that's part of each business's continuity plan. I mean, we can't just have a cookie cutter, solution for all the businesses. It depends on what industry they are. Are they, a small food truck, or, are they just selling pastries off to the side for families and friends? It really depends on what kind of industry they have, and, what those expenses are. It really depends. And each business is trying as best as they can to figure out how to keep income coming in, how to keep paying the bills while keeping afloat.
Yeah. Just to be very frank, how soon might it be when we'll see a lot of people being laid off from their jobs if it continues as it has been in just the last 3-4 weeks?
Unfortunately, we're already hearing that that's been happening. I mean, it's something, and as a chamber, we try not to be the doom and gloom and the negative. We've tried really hard to just speak about what the reality is in the situation. And, we said over and over, when you don't have any revenue coming in, you have to cut costs. And in some cases, you can't, cut your loan payment, right? Or, you can't, cut off paying your water or power, else you have, no water and power for your establishment. And so, unfortunately, employees have been hurt already. And, that's why we continue to ask for these reductions so that we could keep them employed, because even though there are social services out there that can provide some kind of assistance, those generally don't pay your rent. They don't, pay for the school supplies for your kids. They don't pay a lot of things. And so, people really need their jobs. They need to sustain as many hours as they possibly can to be able to support themselves and their families.
Yeah. Who needs to step up here? Does the legislature need to step up? Does the administration need to step up? who needs to step up here to help out just our community as a whole, for the economy?
Well, I think all of us do. I mean, not just the legislature, not just the administration. You see them focusing on different things, but again, sometimes I think that that's why it's really important to have a discussion and a solution-oriented type of meeting where we can collectively come up, because you see the legislature coming up with some ideas, you see the administration putting out some ideas, and you see the chamber. I believe even GHRA has put out some ideas, and but if we're not coordinating and we're not as a group, trying to push an overall Team Guam plan, if you will, to kind of borrow what the administration has put up, it's not something that's beneficial from all sides, and coordinating our efforts to get us over this crisis, then it's hard to say who's really failing, because we all are.
Yeah, that might be a good way to wrap up this conversation, Christine, is you've reached out to the governor, asking her for different things, but haven't had an opportunity yet as a chamber to meet with her, other than prior to her announcement of the thing about, I think it was about a week ago. Where does that stand, and how soon do you think it can happen?
Well, we remain optimistic. We're in discussions with her office. Again, we did have a meeting set up that we were supposed to, and just with the events that have unfolded, unfortunately, she's had to, or fortunately, I think, public health and safety is first and foremost, and she needs to settle that. But we're hoping to circle back and have a meeting within the next couple of days with her and be able to have those discussions, as well as, I reached out to Senator Joe St. Augustine this morning, and so hoping to have a discussion with him as well, since he oversees pretty much, this taxation branch, and has been the author of some bills that had to do with the GRT. So, we're just going to continue to try to dialogue with them, to try to meet up with them and talk about these solutions, and hopefully come to some kind of agreement.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Christine
you.
Boleto, the chairperson of the Guam Chamber of Commerce, really appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing your thoughts and giving us an assessment of what appears to be a very, very gloomy picture right now of the Guam economy. And hopefully, we can get through this, and we will get through this.
We will.
Thanks, Christine.
We will. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. There you have it. That was Christine Boleto, the chairperson of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. As I mentioned, she paints the actual picture. Things are going to be tough. I mean, we can't lose the amount of tourists that we have been and will continue to lose without feeling some pain. And the chamber is, as she mentioned, is trying to do all it can to try and maintain their business as much as possible. But, conditions are going to dictate whether or not they're going to have to start laying off people. And that might be an inevitability at this point. But one of the things that she did mention is that, they've been trying to get a meeting with the governor. Obviously, of course, the governor is a very busy person right now. But she's hopeful that, they can get that meeting in the next couple of days and be able to talk things over and maybe provide some relief to the small business community so that they can keep the employees as long as possible. So we will be following that, and of course we will share whatever information that we get with you. Thanks for watching. Nestor Licanto, KUAM News.